welcome everybody to episode 24. I'm fucking real. Here we've got Luke over here again.
Hello.
Great to have you on here again, brother.
Amazing to be here.
We've got Jen.
Hello.
And we got Danny boy.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, guys.
Pleasure.
So, as you know, but for the listeners at home, today's topic is going to be relationships. Now, in the past, we've done, Jen and myself have done relationships on relationships with money, relationship with self, and then now this is going to be relationships, I guess, in a relationship. So maybe if everyone wants to...
It's a big topic.
Yeah, it's a huge
can of worms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got the best people to
Totally
do it with, man. Yeah. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just go around. It is a big topic, man. It's going to be huge. I mean, I've been thinking about it all day to try and come up with the topic I want to bring to the table, and I've got many really. And I'm more or less just waiting to just open up the table, open up the mics, sink into these conversations, and let rip.
Let's do it.
Get ruthless.
Good.
So maybe we'll just start by just going around the table again and introducing yourselves for those that haven't met you on the podcast before, and maybe just bring up what the topic is or topics that you
Just have a think.
Who wants to go first?
I don't mind, I can go first. So I'm Luke. It's lovely to be here. So, relationships. I'm really fascinated with non-violent communication. I follow a few people, been something that I'm wanting to bring more into my relationships, whether that's with a significant other, friends, family. It just seems to be a really beautiful way of communicating with people so that everybody feels seen, everyone's validated, everyone's heard. I think it would be a good topic to talk about. Just communication in general. I think communication in relationships would be a good one. So that's my topic.
That's good, man. And I think communication's huge, man. I'd love to talk about that as well.
Yeah.
And when you talk without going into the topic straight away, we'll keep going around, but when you've got non-violent communication, it'd be also interesting to hear what violent communication is.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously opposites, yeah?
Yeah, and it's probably more covert than you would think. Yeah.
Cool. Jen.
Hello, I'm Jen Atkins. I'm a life coach and have the business Genesis Mind and Body. This is a huge topic. I think communication is amazing. What's so funny? What have I done?
We've got it. So Luke, for those who
This is
we
real.
had a cacao ceremony just before, and there's bits of cardboard in the cacao.
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
But we're okay. Sorry, Jen.
It's all right.
Yeah. It's
Whoops.
Shit's gonna get real.
My kids will watch this.
sorry.
Sorry, Jen.
Sorry.
Just to follow on from that, I think obviously communication is huge in relationships. It doesn't matter what relationship, whether we're talking friendship, romantic, work or family. Open communication is one, and I think that maybe that's where you're saying, like, if it's, what word did you use, aggressive, violent? Or?
Like non-violent communication. Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting way of putting communication, so I think that's going to be good to go into. But I kind of, in terms of any relationship, and I am going to go off a bit off piste into some juicy other stuff, but first things first is talking about how in relationships we automatically assume that that person should, their job, and I would say particularly in romantic relationships, but even with colleagues and family, it's like your job is to make me happy, and it's like, no, it is not. Yeah. That's your job, and that's where it all goes pear-shaped. And so I'd like to dive deep into that.
Wicked.
And-
I can't wait for this.
Yeah.
And I think, and on the flip of that is, I think everyone, if we're talking relationships, and you and I, I think we've avoided it, but is to go into romantic relationships, because that's where everyone has pain, and that's where most of our heartbreak, I think, comes from, and like deep stuff that's really bringing up your own shit, basically.
Yeah.
So I'd like to delve into how relationships are your teacher, and how they're reflecting back to you what you need to work on to heal.
Cool.
Love that.
That's a must.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good one, Jen. Danny boy.
Hang on, everyone. I'm Danny. Do business development and father of 3. And I'm the opposite of you. I didn't think all day. Last minute, dopamine levels flooding in, the ADHD. And one of the things that came to me was the inner child. And then come next to it was the relationship, your inner child, then the relationship with your children, and the psychology of relationships. And then just scribbling down attachments, trauma bonds, addiction, technology, where I'm 50 years old and coming from seeing my parents' relationship, old school days, to new school days of where it's completely different. Like, and trying to date, you're in your 20s to dating now, completely opposite.
Yeah.
Completely opposite. It's like it's done a 360 turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the way people interact and whatnot, and yeah.
Yeah, that sort of, it goes, I've had a few topics floating around in my head, and they relate to everything you guys have said. But one is, like the old school relationship used to be, you stay together through thick and thin.
Toxic?
Yeah, toxic, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's what I want to sort of talk about with a new age. Yeah, well, traumatic. But at what point what point is it to get in and out of a relationship? So even getting out of a relationship, like a toxic relationship, when is a good point, especially when you've got children as well, because more times than none, that's why the two of you are together, or the main reason. So I'd like to talk about when is a good time, or when, and what does that look like? But then when you come out of a toxic relationship, there's a lot of work you obviously got to do yourself. And I can put my hand up and say I've been through it and going through it, and then having to do that work on yourself. And then when is it the right time to re-enter into a new relationship, even when you've done the work, or if you haven't done the work? I guess you shouldn't
forever doing the work.
Yeah. Or learnt by it, isn't it, really? Yeah.
Trying to grow. Yeah.
It would be good if we did learn from it, because it would most certainly be carried through into the next one. But then at least it's another opportunity to get it right that time. I feel like it just keeps coming.
Yeah.
I think it's like you learn to put boundaries in place, and you learn to stick to them.
Yeah.
And then it starts to change the dynamic.
Yeah.
What you're going to accept. And
So
what
when
you're
you
not
say
gonna
putting
accept.
boundaries, you talking, because see, with me in my relationship, right, my past relationship, Jen knows it really well. You can go, like, when the relationship's toxic, sometimes I don't even know it's toxic, because I don't know what to judge it to, especially when you're young. Some of these younger generation, these younger relationships that are going to be listening, and I guess that's my question. At what point do you sort of cut it off? Or is it the old school way where you just try and keep grinding away at it, try and work it out, and you keep together for the kids, and do it the old school way?
Sure. I just got an image of a glass of water, and if the water, you pour like a bit of dirt into the water, and it gets dirty water, right? If you're willing to clean the water, then the water can stay clear. So I guess it only gets toxic if we're dumping our stuff and stuff's coming up and we're not willing to process it, to work through it together. Because from my experience, when I've been in a relationship, when I first met them, it wasn't a toxic relationship. The toxicity came when all of the stuff came up. And then when it's unprocessed and not dealt with, then it's just a soup of toxicity.
Yeah.
And I guess it just takes people that are willing to do the work and evolve together and hopefully clear the glass of water.
And I guess this is where communication comes into it. I mean, communication is going to come up with all of this, I'd imagine. but communication comes into it because, I mean, if you're feeling something in a relationship, and it was a good point what you said then, we all go into a relationship. It's not toxic at the start. So
because everyone's wearing masks,
Possibly.
right at the beginning.
Possibly. Yeah.
trying to present their best version of themselves.
Especially if you're an ex-people pleaser like myself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. You're doing a sales job. You want to sell the best version of yourself. I have to do it for work most days. I've got to sell to people. So on goes that mask, or what is it, imposter syndrome, or
Yeah. But I guess, like, if you guys choose each other, I feel like everyone wears a mask when you first go into a relationship, you know? It's just that it's almost like a thing. If when you spend enough time together, that stuff comes up, I suppose it's like we have to define what a relationship would be worth getting into. Like, if you have shared values, if there's attraction, whether sexual compatibility, the communication's relatively clear and open, and there's honesty, and all the things and the values align, then you guys can decide whether you're going to accept and work on the stuff that starts to spill out. But
having the hard talks in the early days.
Well, well, exactly right. I mean, I just know, even with the few, I mean, I haven't been on a date in, over 10 months, and I've just been on a couple of dates recently. And it's very important to just be honest with yourself and them into it. There's a lot of things that obviously I don't want to bring up or talk about. But fucking, I just feel like I've almost gone into it like loving yourself and not really giving a fuck. Fuck, if they're going to love you, you're not going to please everyone in this world. But I guess that's me after doing the work on myself, though. There's people out there, I had no fucking idea. I still got no idea, but I had less of an idea back when I got into my first relationship with my ex, And, well, it's the old saying, isn't it? You just wish you knew now. Back then, hindsight, Hopefully. I can see your brain ticking over there a little bit, Jen.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I think when you first meet someone as well, though, you're like that euphoric scenario is, masking all those feelings and masking a whole heap of stuff that you're like, oh, this is, like this person must be amazing, because it's like a drug, you're not feeling your inadequacies, and then as time goes on they start popping up, and then typically people then project their stuff onto the other person. They don't know they're doing it, and then the person's feeling that and even taking it on board and thinking it is them, and so that's when I think the toxicity sort of starts. But at the end of the day, if you don't have any self-awareness, it's pretty hard. And I think that people talk about relationship work, and I personally don't. Yes, there's communication within a relationship, but prior to that, it's like, nah, you need to work on you, and you need to work on you, and then you have the absolute opportunity to have an amazing relationship if you're both willing to do that. And it comes down to truth. It comes down to vulnerability, and we don't do that. Even when we're like, you guys talked about masks, and yeah, sure, and when you first meet people, maybe you're trying to impress and all that kind of thing. But then in like a marriage, it's roles. And you fall into roles, and this is what you're meant to do, and blah, blah, blah. And that becomes another mask. And then there's rules. I signed the piece of paper, you're not allowed, you do this, you do that. Like we have rules, which to me totally kills any relationship. So, and I can talk personally about that, but,
Well, so what do you suggest, though? Like, there's someone there sitting in a relationship, right? And it's hard. I mean, we can talk about my past relationship. I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but Jen's, well, just so people know, like Jen's been like my life coach for, I mean, we've known each other probably eight years, if not more.
Yeah.
And, so she's seen me go through everything, really, basically. With my mum, we've been an absolute fucking animal with drugs and alcohol and, you know, abusive behaviours and whatnot. But she's also seen me lose my business and regather myself and move forward. And I mean, she knew about this podcast probably 3 years before this even happened, you know, so.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
When you said abusive behaviours, you know, drugs, alcohol, could it be healing behaviours at the time?
Yeah. Oh, for sure, man. Like are you talking about, so we were talking about this before the podcast. So when I've got trauma, when it's coming up, I go and be destructive. Yeah, for sure, man. Alcohol was my go-to, man, for a lot of that stuff. But the other thing about it all, man.
Mine too, yeah.
Yeah, so within a relationship, I never knew what a good relationship was growing up. So when my relationship was good, I couldn't fucking handle it. So I went out and, not purposely, but I had a pattern of going out and sort of destroying myself to make myself back to that uncomfortable feeling again that I've been used to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring you back into the safe zone.
Yeah.
So when I first started dating and the relationships I had, and I could see, you know, like the mask, like the inner child, like I was mirroring that person there. They're more fucked up than they're not. I was the one, and it was a mirror, and I got to fix them. I got to help them, but it should have been me myself. I should have been helping and fixing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the projection.
Correct.
Yeah.
Fuck, that's
It's your problem, not mine. And you see it so easily in others, but you're like, oh, God, okay.
So it was pattern. It was, you know, one after another of, I'm going to fix them. I'm going to help them,
And you
that feeling.
probably picked them for that reason.
Well, what do they say? Love at first sight, trauma bond at first sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because there's a need to do that for you. It's filling that bit, and it's actually not letting you deal with the shadow bit that you
Correct.
really need to look at. It's just a distraction. But of course, you don't know you're doing it at the time, right?
And I think as time went on, no, I didn't know at the time, but, you know, coming around the early days when there's no mobile phones, there's no laptops, computers, you're not, you know, the connection's not there. You dealt with a lot of stuff, but then as time went on, there's phones and it's like, oh, you didn't answer my call, you didn't answer my text, like, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I didn't want to pick my phone up. I want to be alone. I want that time out, but, you know, then trying to heal through that way and, you know, for me, it just went from one end of the scale to the other. Like all of a sudden, it's more like having a relationship with a phone and social media and it's got all this input into your relationship. And it was just like, fuck, like, I was just trying to cope.
Yeah, there's all those comparisons and the mind goes crazy with that. But
And everyone's showing their perfect life. And
actually, what you just said made me think of something, is that how we are viewing the world is basically, you know, our programming from when, you know, being little to adults, and the experiences we loved, we went, oh, that's so hardwired. Oh, that's really cool. Oh, I love that. Clinging. So hence you're okay, you know, clinging. And then the flip side is you have experiences that you hated, that were horrible, that were traumatic, and the brain goes, no, be on alert for that. We don't want that shit. And so then you've got those goggles on and you're seeing the world from that perspective. And that's why we're all seeing a different world and experiencing actually different things. And that's why it's so important to clear the subconscious programs to, you know, not be reacting, because that's all we're doing.
Yeah.
I've been delving into it a little bit and just reading how, you know, if you start texting someone every day, you actually build an addiction to that person. And then, you know, in the relationship as it develops and goes on, your brain starts producing chemicals to that attachment, that addiction, and the back and forth. I think, you know, one of my relationships was I was an avoidant and that person was anxious. So moment any conflict or drama, it's just like, I'll shut down and don't deal with it and just stonewall, become an absolute silent beast. And to me, it's like, not going to deal with it, not going to communicate. But that's where probably for a relationship, the biggest point is at that time where you've got to heal and repair, and that ability to heal and repair is what's going to continue on. And I've been with that person where it was absolute epitome of the pits, you know, the bottom. You know, me getting to the point where, you know, I was ready to take my own life. There was no drugs or alcohol. It was just got that low, you know, and it was just ready to end it all, you know. And I had children to worry about, and I think that's what kept me going, and digging myself out of it, doing work on myself, and then having a friendship with that person where it was the highest of highs because we had the ability to heal and repair.
Amazing.
Like, but then it going pear-shaped again. So it's it's a roller coaster.
Cycle. Yeah.
And I think we're all addicted to the roller coaster subconsciously somehow.
But the thing, you know, I found in, you know, my personal experience as well as, you know, I've been that low as well, and you know, it's not fun. Is to realise that what you're receiving, of course, when you're in the depths of it, it feels like it's happening to you, for you, not to you, Dave. But is to know that it's for your growth, and like it's somehow a gift. That's what I've always said to myself. Even so, if you're out there having a really shit of a time, like, is to just know, you know, see it as a good thing, because you're getting guided to work through this suffering. There's a gift at the other side of the suffering, and if we don't suffer, we don't grow. Like, nothing happens. But it's, you know, equally as shit when it's happening.
In that time though, Jen, so okay, someone's suffering in a relationship, and they're at that point, and what you're trying to say is that although it feels like it's against you, it's actually for you. So the first thing there would be to accept it, that it's happening for you.
Yes.
Try to stop being a victim to it, and perhaps look at what's coming up and where you can work on yourself to either release it or work on it for the better. What are some of the things you can do as a person, you know, that may be out there listening to it? And you know what, like, in a relationship, because what's coming up here is, like, you need to be honest to yourself in the relationship for the relationship to work. And we all know, although sometimes we might not admit it to our partner or to the people around us, but really deep down we sort of know where, I don't know, I sort of always knew where I was going wrong and things like that. Sometimes it's a matter of, like, where do you turn to though? You know, how do you really work that issue or that pattern that you've got in the relationship, or what's going on, you know?
I honestly think for me, like, I've and I'm happy to share this, is like, I had known him now for 30 years, 20-year marriage, and there was infidelity on his behalf. Absolutely devastated me, and I was blindsided, like, no clues whatsoever. And I will say, like, we are not together. We're separated. But we have a relationship, and I've learnt through, we actually have a really amazing relationship, and it's because it's based on truth, which is ironic given how that happened. And my only stipulation in boundaries, I think, you know, when shit happens, you have a choice to either bolt and not get anything and stay bitter and blah, 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 or learn the lesson and create boundaries for yourself. It's not about going, oh, I condone crappy behaviour. It's about creating your own boundaries. And mine was just be real with me. Like, I love you did this. Of course, I wish you hadn't, but you're human, and I need to try and understand your humanness if I'm to love you. And so that's opened a space up for us. But, you know, we are, like I say, we are not together, but, you know, I'm very, very grateful for the journey that we're on. But recently I went to India, and, you know, to answer your question about, well, what do you do? And I've done so much work. I mean, this was 8 years ago, and I am still working on this stuff because it's not just the betrayal, it brings up your own stuff. You know, like, not good enough, blah, 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 you know, all the deep wounds that we all have that I think, you know, we obviously all share. And so being in India on this Ayurvedic retreat, quietening down, stuff just bubbled up for me. And I think if you've done enough work, you'll be like that. It's the inquiry of like, what are you feeling? What is this? And oh man, if you go into it, it's like he still shouldn't be doing this or whatever, And it's like, but hang on a minute, that's a thought, and that's a thought that is causing you suffering. Is it true? No, it's just a thought. And all of our suffering isn't caused by the truth. It's caused by our thoughts, our version of the truth,
100.
which is, again, this conditioning of I liked that, I didn't like that. So, oh, my God, I let go of... It was kind of eye-opening. And you just in a space where you're able to do that. But I think in the world that we're in, which is busy and stuff, it just gets jammed down, and you don't have that space and that quiet and that, I don't know, nurturing around you to do that. And I think everyone needs to take just time out and let yourself be. Your shit will bubble up. Universe will tell you exactly what you need to work on.
Well, our podcast before this, and who's watching this and wants to know more about that, is relationship with self. And the reason why we done relationship with self before relationship with others is because you need to get your relationship with yourself right before you can be in a relationship with others. And I guess that's what you're saying is, but I guess you can still do that when you're in a relationship, I'd imagine as well. You still need that time out, don't you? You need to keep
100%.
developing.
Well, ultimately, there are no others, and people might just go, oh, my God, what have you just said?
No.
But, everyone's just pointing to what, you literally having a relationship with yourself through other people.
Everyone's on a journey.
Yeah, and we can all help each other, and I think that's where, like, rules, judgments, I don't know who said, I think it was you, like, when's the right time to leave a relationship? I don't know, that depends on you. Like, there isn't anyone can tell you that. It's like, oh, this person did this, is that a right or wrong? It's compared to what?
Would I sum it up, though, by being that, and just even in this short conversation we've had already, if the two individuals, okay, it's a little bit rocky or it's a little bit toxic, but if the two of them, if your communication's getting better, you're having your own equal honesty to the relationship, and you're both equally doing the work, you're giving each other space to work on themselves, you're doing the forgiving thing and not holding on to thoughts that are ruining your relationship or adding toxicity to the relationship. I feel if you're doing all that, then it's still worth holding on to, isn't it, really? But if one person's doing it and the other's not, if the one's blaming and the other one's doing the work, I don't know.
One of the best experiences I had was, like, after I broke up with that person, I asked them, would they come to counselling? And they go, what, to get back together? I'm like, no, to see where we went wrong, where we fucked it all up, like to work on ourselves. And the amount of, in a short space of time, the amount I learnt on myself, unfortunately they couldn't commit for too long, but the journey, that I was at that low point where I was ready to end it all. And then learning where I went wrong, and, they learnt a lot where they went wrong, and your attachment styles and whatnot, and it was brilliant. I went on to have one of the best friendships. But
and
then
turning it into a positive, man, that's what I love about it.
That's very courageous.
Yes.
And absolutely. And I've had the same, like, I have an amazing relationship, like, way, way, way deeper, which sounds ironic, than it would ever have been because of the truth.
Correct.
The deep truth. That you don't actually, we hide really who we are. And I didn't know that,
Can you reconcile a relationship this far down the track? Or is it always safer to keep it as what it is now?
I don't know. Like, I'm sort of, I look at it like, how do you know? I mean, we don't, it's like saying what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, true.
I think you have to just go where you're going, and you're going to grow in a certain way, and you're either, funnily enough, we've grown together in very different scenarios, like, the opposite of of the scenario. He's grown through doing that. But it's all about accepting, though, that if you really truly love someone, it's accepting that they are doing something, and if you can be happy for them and not be with them. I mean, it's a tough gig. I'm not going to, lie. And be happy that they're with somebody else. Then, I think that's. What can you say to that?
It's love.
Yeah.
So what about people that are in open relationships then?
That's a different topic.
Well, I think
I was waiting for it to drop.
well, I think that's.
I know someone, and it's like I can't wrap my head around it, but
Yeah.
they can.
I don't know that I can either. But I think, again, I wouldn't judge them. It's their gig.
If it's
I would
working, man.
find it hard to navigate, because that's super complicated. I mean, I think my situation, but
It's hard with one.
yeah, but
Or none.
yeah.
Hey, Jen, I think this comes down to what you were talking about, though. Like, we're not here to make the other person, like, to fill their cup. Like, we should be secure with ourselves. Now, I look at my new way of looking at a relationship, or how I'm going into the new relationship, is that everything's an experience. I don't want to hold on to anything like, yeah, this is great. And it's really hard, because when you are doing those text messages, you naturally
Yeah, but you don't get that emoji and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's my love heart emoji?
But like, there's a part of me that doesn't want to hold on to these experiences, because they're just experiences that can come and go. Some are going to take longer than others. But I also don't want to suppress it either. Like, I've suppressed it for so many years, And I think in terms of open relationships, if you can be very happy within yourself and just allow experiences to come and go without holding on to them or suppressing them, and just naturally just let them come and go, I think if you're happy with that and it works,
Depends where you're at.
that's where you're at. I think,
yeah, totally.
And I actually admire the people that can actually do it, because they are just there's no blockages there.
There's the way that I kind of see everything is that when I feel like relationships is such a huge topic, but I feel like when you really choose someone and you come into union with somebody, there is something energetically when you are committed or devoted to one person that spiritually entwines you into, and almost like catapults you into a dynamic of experience that may not be able to be experienced by yourself, and if you were with multiple people all the time. There's a level of depth that happens in the reflection that you really get to see the other. Well, you get to see yourself through the other. Because if you think about plant medicine, like say you're on an ayahuasca journey, you know that everything that you see in that journey is for you. It's like the medicine is showing you everything. It's uncomfortable as fuck. All your stuff comes up. If we viewed life in the same way, because life is a plant medicine journey, that every single person you meet is reflecting an aspect of self. Friends, relationships with family. When you then come into union with the other, it's like this energy really amps up. You get to see the deepest parts of yourself through the other. And if you're both willing to then do the work of seeing it, it's taking responsibility at the end of the day of that's my stuff. Can you imagine if everything the other person did was just reflecting an aspect of the self that we were unwilling to look at? And when you talked about your experience, and that's devastating. I've been cheated on, and it's crushing. It's crushing. And to hear that what came out of that was compassion and love, there was a level of healing that the gift at the end of the trauma was this, like, you always get the gift in plant medicine as well. It's like, well done, you went through this. It seems like there was something beautiful that was gifted to you after that experience, whether that be a deeper sense of being able to set boundaries, of self-worth after the trauma of feeling inadequacy, of which is very natural when you've been cheated on. to then sit with the other and still love them and have some sort of relationship where you're still, I think it's amazing. I think it's beautiful.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I do think, though, that when people, in relationships, it's like, oh, they did this to me. God, I kept doing that, sorry. And it's like, no, they didn't. Like, they just did what they did.
Yeah.
It's actually not personal. But, of course, it doesn't feel like that when it's happening. But I feel like without that suffering, and I'm like talking like on the carpet, fetal position, oh my God, clawing at the carpet, just like worst pain ever, thinking like this is the end for me. Like it's like, but then you have to come out of the other side of that and realise, oh, hang on a minute. Where did I even play a part in this? And it's not about blame or anything, but it's made me realise I compromised a lot in the relationship without even knowing I was doing that. And you start looking at yourself. So I've got a far greater love for myself than I ever did when we were together. And you know what? If you totally don't love yourself, and man, that's a journey. It's totally not there yet. But you can't that person can't actually love you completely the way you want to, because your heart somehow you've closed it up. So yeah, I mean, that's a whole...
I just want to go back to this in relation to both those conversations, but when you say going into a relationship reflects your inner self sort of thing, for me it was insecurity. So like being the way I've been brought up and the things I've seen in the relationships and that, like insecurity was fucking massive. And I'm only just, and then going into what you're saying, to be able to actually feel, I mean, I never fucking felt. I had a 15-year relationship and I don't think I ever really allowed myself to feel. And why was that? Is because I was insecure. I was insecure myself. I didn't know what feeling was or how to give. But also just going back to what you're saying as well, Jen, like, I was never really intentionally trying to do anything wrong. I was always only just doing my best at the time.
Of course.
So if anyone was to blame me for it, it's like, well, yeah.
I think actually that's a really, really good point, is that, to get to that level of depth of relationship and intimacy and vulnerability, you need to be that open. And I doubt many people get to that level. That's what we're all searching for.
Yeah.
But you've got to get it to within yourself. But to lay yourself open to somebody in all aspects, it's terrifying for most of us, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think, that's what we all want. We're just scared of it.
Yeah.
We're just terrified.
And how funny is that? We're talking more and more about this vulnerability. And again, I'm one of those people that when I read a book, I want everyone to read it. And it's the way of...
the way of the superior man.
Yeah, the way of the superior man.
Yeah,
David
that's why I was
Dieter.
it was me thinking about David Dieter with when I just said that, actually.
And
what if you're in a relationship and you think you're doing the wrong thing?
if you think you're doing it.
Yeah, like so the early days, well, I keep saying early days, I feel like I'm an old man.
If you
Back in
are,
my day.
I'm a boomer according to my kids, but I'm not. I'm only 50. But they call me boomer. Like, from what I was thinking, my 20s, the flowers and, open the doors and everything romantic and whatnot, writing letters, postcards. There was no phones,
Yeah.
Well, there was basic phones, no emojis. No social
With the amount of
media.
girlfriends you had, you must have been writing a few letters.
Oh,
You
haven't had that many,
Stamp
come on.
account.
like proper relationships, but then
The 100 box.
and then going to the opposite in the scale of where, in my 40s, where all of a sudden these girls in their 20s are like wanting to throw themselves at you. I'm like, I could be your father. Like, what's going on here? Like, something's not right. And then knowing in yourself, like, one of the things I learned quite quite a few years ago was the relationship a father has with his daughter, which for yourself you'll pick up, is very important on who they seek in a male partner later on. So when I was with this girl, and all of a sudden, from this view I had of how a relationship was meant to be, of all loving and intimate and whatnot, then all of a sudden, I probably shouldn't be saying it, but they're wanting to get slapped and choked and spat on, and it's like abusive. And I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on here? Like, to me, this has just flipped 180 of what I thought a relationship was. And it's like, if you didn't do that, they're not going to be with you. It's like,
Really?
yeah.
Yeah, they're out there for sure.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh well, I've learnt something today.
Yeah,
Wow.
but it's a good point though.
Is
man.
that because that's what they're used to?
Well,
is that like that's how they see?
don't know.
It's modelling a behaviour.
Don't know. Yeah.
I think it's more like an ego image.
Use that word, fuck boys.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you mean so with somebody
Daddy
having
issues.
those types of desires, it's the whole dominant and submissive kind of
Probably, yeah.
thing coming in.
But then what if it's like daddy issues and that bad past, or
Well, yeah, it stems from
that
it would
relationship
stem
with a
from
father
somewhere
or
like
something, or
that.
male figure?
100%. And I would say that there is a space, there's a container that you can create where it does not have to be that. That's violence. And
Yeah,
that
and
is-
I mean,
that-
domestic
yeah,
violence at the
100%.
moment
Right.
towards women is
Yeah.
Totally.
insane.
That is violence, and if there is a woman or a man who is wanting to experience what it is like to be in a certain dynamic, there is a way of being able to do that in a very safe way where violence is not involved whatsoever. You don't have to be choking, spinning. That's almost like derogatory, Like, I get it, and if you're into it, then you're into
So
it.
they
Find someone else that you're
are they
into.
trying to heal a wound
I would say so. It's
or satisfy a wound?
Well, where female is naturally
men do it too.
Matching, it's
not just
matching an
both.
identity
No, it's
of
both.
how you
Yeah.
see
Oh, is it
yourself.
both?
Some men want
Yeah.
to be stepped on and all sorts of stuff, and
Yeah. Well,
Well, it's your identity.
is it
isn't
an unhealthy masculine? And I'm only new to this masculine feminine type relationships and what it really means, because I'm learning it through that book and other podcasts and
Yeah.
things. But for a masculine is to dominate, right? Like naturally in a healthy way. So is that just them wanting an unhealthy masculine?
There's always a shadow aspect to everything. There's a shadow aspect to like a dominance can just be. It can be really sacred. Like dominance can just be leading. That's all really dominance is creating a space where the other can feel safe enough to be fully surrendered in that state. And if they need violence to feel surrendered, then there needs to be some work around that, where that is a toxic trait. I would personally, I mean, I don't judge anyone who's into that. It's like each to their own.
Yeah.
But for me, I wouldn't participate in something like that. But I would create a scenario where it's safe, where my partner can be fully surrendered, which means I will just be leading and holding her away that can facilitate that. And it's not with any force or violence. Yeah, I don't know.
No,
I feel like
you probably know, Dave, but there's certain things now. If a guy doesn't do it to the girl or whatever, she's like, no, you don't do that, you don't do this, you don't do that, and like, then it's
Wow.
very sexually sort of based.
we're living in a world which is highly, highly sexualized.
Correct.
And it's overly sexualized, everything.
Does it
Because
that come from porn?
I was going to say, is it pornography? And
MTV,
people
soft
think-
porn. I never used to
Yeah.
let my kids
People
watch
think-
MTV. I couldn't even put it on because Nicki Minaj is like shaking it right in my face.
Well, porn has
the
been
75 inch.
weaponized in the
Yeah.
past. Even in wars, they littered the streets with pornography with the enemy because they knew that it takes. We're back to sexual energy and semen
Correct.
retention. That our sexual essence is sacred. It is the most powerful. It's spiritual essence. It's our light. It's our chi. It's our prana. If we ejaculate it out in ways that we like, containing your sexual
it
energy,
changes you. From porn, it changes your chemicals.
it does. We're releasing our greatest asset, willy nilly. Excuse the pun, but if you hold on to that and cultivate it, and let's say because I have a partner and I am practicing periodic semen retention.
Qigong does it. So I've done
Yeah,
qigong.
yeah. And when you are in that state, you are, well, that's a state of control. That's leader. It's like I am being able to hold a space where I'm contained. And it's not just about sexuality. It's about deep intimacy. It's about safety and vulnerability in that space. And that is, for me, that's magic, you know? Like, I don't fuck to come.
Yeah.
I used to, and I've had trouble with pornography in the past, and I've spoke about that on here a few times. Yeah. But I awoke to the power that everyone holds, men and women. Our sexual energy is sacred as, and when you come together and you circulate that energy between you without spilling it, you're untouchable. And why sexuality has been demonized, and it's everywhere, because they want you to waste that shit, because you're powerless when you do. Because the dopamine, the serotonin, all of these chemicals that go off, you're addicted. It's like...
Well, that's why it's free now.
Yeah, that's
Pretty
it.
much.
Fuck you, man. And that's a good message too, bro. Thanks for sharing that, man. Because like that's a message that really does need to not just get out to males, but females as well. You
Both.
know. But you can't be that unless you feel safe in a feminine.
100%.
You know what I mean? So, but then she can't give you that if you're being a weak.
But it's not about, yeah. So, but we are allowed to be not on all the time at our strongest. We're allowed to feel weak. Like, I feel like this is one of the biggest problems in men. It's like, if we are vulnerable, if I share with you my inadequacies or my shortcomings, it makes me less of a man. And therefore, I'm going to be rejected. And then my partner needs to become the masculine, and I become all these dynamics. It's like, I feel like we used to live in such a polarized world, and now, due to evolution, we're becoming way more balanced. But it needs to be a lot of attention and care around that, because what used to be one holding the pole and the other holding the opposite, and it working and being harmonious, it's kind of not doing that anymore. We have to be very conscious about these dynamics and the flow of coming up and down, where if my partner is being more dominating, then I can feel safe enough in my own masculinity to allow that to happen and me not feel emasculated for it. Because it's in the feeling of being emasculated, that's when the strength is truly lost. That's when the other sees you as being like, oh, you're not comfortable in that. So you can't hold that. And again, it comes to safety, a container of safety. It's huge.
Can I ask a question? When was everyone's first exposure to porn? What age?
Young. I think like 13.
13.
Yeah, I think so. 13.
It probably would be about that, I'd imagine. 13, 14.
6 years old.
That's probably a bit old, isn't it?
Six, wow.
Yeah, going
years
around
old.
to building
Oh my
sites.
God.
Building sites, and then in grade 2, so how old are you in grade 2? What, 7, 8 years old?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, father had a news agent, and he'd bring magazines to school. And I think it wasn't more the case of wanting to see it and whatnot, it was just knowing you're doing something wrong, addicted
Yeah.
to that high of like, oh shit, this is bad, like
True.
wrong, breaking rules or laws.
Yeah, for
or,
sure.
You're
Yeah.
a young kid, like, at a young age, that was my first exposure.
Yeah.
I looked at it thinking, shit, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't
You
it?
didn't really know what you're
Wanting to
looking
fit
at.
in. Wanting to fit in.
Of course,
so-
yeah.
But I mean, when you're that young, like you don't have the ability to go, oh, that you just take that in as that's how it's meant to be. So I think with what we're talking about, these sexual behaviours and things, it's like that's, people are trying to get connection through doing certain things, and it's completely the wrong way of, look, it's porn isn't intimacy, it's not connection, it's not.
It's a career for
You know,
some people.
Yeah.
So I think, if that's all you're looking at, but then so many people don't know that, right? And so how many people go through your entire life not actually feeling that beautiful gift that you're meant to feel when you actually do connect with someone on that level?
We're not taught how to do that.
No, we're not.
No.
And again, just you talking about your relation, like that's amazing. Like, but to allow that level of vulnerability, we're scared of doing that.
Yeah.
So someone watching this podcast, right, and wants what you, because you elaborated that fucking perfect, man, and I feel that it's so much truth in what you, it was all truth, and it was beautiful what you said. So for someone sitting at home going, fuck, it does make sense, because being vulnerable is, to my age now, I've never been vulnerable up until, a few years, and still trying to learn to do it. But what's the advice for someone at home watching and going, fuck, like, where do you start with that? Because one, if you go up to your partner and say, let's say you've been together 5 years, and say, where do they start with it? Is there any good books or good podcasts or anything like that then where people or couples can be inspired, because it's so normal to go to the bedroom and watch some fucking porn. But I wonder where the normal, if a couple wants to replace it with some...
It comes down to the basic of willingness to tell the truth.
Yeah, truth, honesty. Like, what do you like? What do you, what do you want? What do you need?
Yeah.
Just basic. And just having a conversation, not even in the bed, just having a conversation. What do you like? What do you mean? How do you feel? We don't talk about our feelings, and that's the problem. We bury shit, and then we deal with it, with sex. So it's crazy.
It's take the end goal out of it. So take away that there is going to be an end goal. Just do it for a week.
Take the orgasm out.
Yeah, take it out. Just do it for a week, and with your partner, and you are going to, if you are with a partner and everything's healthy and you feel vulnerable enough to say, hey, it's all about curiosity and play. It's like, we're gonna do an experiment. For a week, we're not going to orgasm, but we're going to make time every single night and spend an hour in bed together, and we're going to do everything apart from that. Like, we're going to touch, and we're just going to explore each other's bodies. We're going to speak to each other what that feels like in that moment. And then you're just getting to know each other. You're getting to know each other's bodies.
Yeah, amazing. And the level of intimacy that creates, then the real, awesome sex is on the
next
back
level.
of that.
True.
Again, it's another level.
You can't get to that level without that. Otherwise, it's just an orgasm. And we can all do that ourselves. Really,
it's quite scary to go into that, because I'm practicing all that now. It's scary to go down there, especially if you don't know it. Because what does it look like? How do you do it? To open up that conversation to your partner, especially for a male, I feel like I'd be a little bit more acceptant to it if the female come and approach me about it. I'd go, oh, that sounds pretty good. Not now, but but I guess if you're really wanting that deep relationship, they're the sort of hard truths you got to have. Those open conversations.
I think one thing I learned, what you explained, Luke, was perfection, and Jen as well. And then I learned that, after all that, great experience, what happens afterwards as well. Because for a long time, I think in my early 20s, when I did security on the doors, and I see a girl go with a different guy each week from the club, and it just put this really negative view on females and girls and relationships, and then when initially started dating and wouldn't let them go down on me, oral was disgusting, dirty, didn't like it, and then going through a long time period of where having sex, and then the moment finished, run to the shower, felt dirty, felt disgusted, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I need to clean myself." Like, I felt horrible.
That was your program, though, because you even said that from when you were a kid, right? You had the program, sex is dirty, that's bad.
Well, but then from a young age, discovering myself, I think 10 years old was the first time I played with myself and came, and then knowing that it was something naughty and wrong and not meant to be doing, being brought up as an altar boy and in a Catholic school and whatnot, but then not having, had the fear of God, of, sex before marriage is sinful.
Fuck, that's a topic in itself.
That's huge,
I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to die. Like, I'm going to be struck down with a lightning bolt. Bang.
It's the shame.
Until holding out till I was 22, until I lost my virginity.
It is huge.
Which at my time was quite late for a boy, because I remember going to high school and there's boys having sex at 13 and 14 and girls, and it's like, I didn't fit in.
It is interesting to me, the whole
religion thing.
thing, because there's also truth to it.
Yeah.
And it can be weaponized, or it can be done in a really beautiful way. And if it's done, I think the essence of scripture, or not even scripture, just the seed of these kind of concepts is true. The whole sex before marriage thing could, number one, potentially really match you with somebody that is truly your counterpart. Because if you take sex out of it and sexual attraction, then you are going to less likely just pick the one that you are really attracted to, and if your values don't match at all, then we'll work on it. Whereas if you're with somebody and you take sex out of the equation, you have to really get to know somebody and at a deep level without sex and without spilling your seed, both of you. So I feel like it would end up matching you with somebody that is really a good kind of match for you. Because I think for me, sex was a
sometimes
huge
when
thing.
you have sex, or even if you're sort of dating a little bit, and then when you get to the sleeping stage, it's almost like you've made that connection.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit harder to move, like break it off and move on.
It's supposed to.
Yeah.
Because that's when that whole sacred mirroring is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Implanted your
So
You know, I tried-
take your time, eh?
I tried that after when my marriage finished, and I was dating this girl, and I think for about 3 to 6 months, didn't even kiss her, just getting to know her and whatnot. And
Yeah.
and I remember after close to 6 months, she's pushed me up against the wall, and then and we got it on, and then she goes, "I thought you were gay." So why? But
Took
then
so
not
long, man.
knowing she was, like there was a lot of trauma there, and then it became a trust break. I think it was on my birthday. For some reason, always things happen on my birthday. And then basically come around, and then I turned around and said, "You know what? This can't be a relationship, it's only going to be a sexual one." And every day having sex, multiple times, and it was just a sexual relationship with that person. And then that's when it came next level to see all these things come out where it's like, oh shit, like what's going on here? And then finding out that they did have a past of trauma and whatnot, and like just not knowing in the back of your mind, is it just me that's the only person satisfying it, and then probably knowing that it's not, and it's just destructive.
I totally relate to everything you say, man. It's like when you get brought up this way, you're very, what's the word? You get to learn the wrong ways of having a relationship and sex. And fuck it, to now really opening up and having the opportunity to being by myself and alone and rediscovering a new way and sex, it's completely fucking different to everything I ever thought.
Same.
Yeah.
Well, I'd never had, like, in my family, there was never two topics never discussed: sex and drugs. Never discussed. I don't know if they were discussed in yours, but
Yeah, I was pretty lucky.
never discussed in mine.
What about Brian on the last podcast we done? How we talked about, it's Uncle Brian goes and talks to the younger kids growing up, the teenagers in the family, and he has those conversations, that's about sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah. It's
I think
important to have
it's really important, isn't it? Yeah. But as a parent, it's hard to do. Like,
I've done it with my daughter. Like, I've had the chats to her about drugs. Sex, I used to get everyone say, "Oh, you've got a daughter, this and that," and my daughter ended up coming out recently as lesbian, so didn't have to worry. But still making sure, I'll say to her, you're not, there's no attachment there or traumas, or make sure you treat that person right. If you want to be with someone, be with them. If you don't stuff them around.
yeah.
And she's come out pretty good. So
Amazing.
Well, even though she's come out and she's lesbian, the same tragic things can happen if it's male or
100%.
female.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. It's just that we, just because it's
And her journey to that, to come out to that was quite tough, especially in today's day and age. You don't fit in into all the kids at school and whatnot, and
Yeah.
How long did it take for her to be able to speak to you about that before she sort of really
couple
knew?
of years, and kind of come out in a little bit of a traumatic way. So yeah.
Yeah. And
But
sometimes
then
just
being
going
there for her, like, that's probably one of the most vulnerable times. And you're just worried about your child, and worried about the bullying they're going to cop at school and whatnot. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man. Hey, I want to talk about your topic you brought up, man. about the
non-violent
Violent.
communication.
non-violent communication.
It was more just a discussion that I wanted to have around more communication, really, and like the different dynamics of communication. Because there is a few people that I've been watching. One of them is Marshall Rosenberg. The other is actually a Perth guy, you know, James Fish.
Yep.
And they talk about communication in such a way where both parties are validated. And again, it comes back to truth and vulnerability and safety. Sometimes if you're approaching your partner and you're like, hey, you're triggered or whatever, even though you say, let me say, like, when you did this, you really hurt me. Like, that doesn't sound like it's violent. But for some people, the body responds as if there's been a violent threat towards you with that. Because now I'm feeling insecure and inadequate. Maybe I'm going to lose you. Maybe something's going to happen that I'm not in control of. So the body goes into fight or flight mode, which is where the violence comes in. It's not necessarily someone's being violent towards you. It's just that we can change the communication method in me saying, when this happened, I felt angry and sad because I thought that you felt this way. So let's say, for example, let me think of an example.
Are we? I'm sort of picking up what you're saying, but like, so are we responsible, Jen? Like, you might be able to answer this as well. So I get that, because sometimes I can be quite ruthless in the way how I can say something. Like, I'll say it how it is, you know, and not really taking too much consideration on how the other person has received that. And never, even
Is that
if
being ruthless or is that being real?
Well, being real, fucking real, yeah. Yeah, well, exactly, man. And but which I actually like that, because that's
communicating.
Yeah. But I don't. I guess sometimes I never really think about how the other person's receiving that, and I guess this is the question that I want to ask Jen.
I guess how you deliver it, maybe.
Yeah. Well, are we responsible for triggering the other person's?
No.
I wouldn't say so.
receptive to it?
No,
Yeah.
you can't be. And even if you're like, I'm quite straightforward as well, or, you know, spade's a spade. You know, it's like, don't want to beat around the bush, but I'm not trying to hurt somebody. I'm just saying it as it is. But you can't know somebody's triggers. And I think the point is, if somebody does get triggered, it's the acknowledgement of that. And I think, you know, if the communication's happening in that time, is to, let's just say you've said something and that person is triggered and they've verbalised that, or it's obvious that you've hit a nerve, is to not go into it with them when they're in that space. That's not healthy, because they're actually having
a reaction.
Is to make them feel safe in that space, let them go through, and then when they're okay, what happened?
Sorry, Jen. Is it you make them feel safe, or they got to make themselves feel safe?
I think well, they have to, but I also think that, you know, I mean, it depends on your level of awareness. It's not your responsibility how somebody else is feeling.
Like,
However,
what if there's anything like, you know, I won't say which relationship it was, but this person, you know, like, oh, you can't have facial hair, you look horny. Or you don't dress like a dad. You know, like,
wow.
You know? Oh, you're a beast, go to the gym. Oh, what are you doing in the gym? Picking up girls. Like, so it was like nothing could feel safe for them, and then realising, hey, you know what? You've got some issue with trust. Something's happened, and finding out later that they cheated on their partner of, you know, their childhood love and engaged, and then realising they have a major, like, trust, like, trauma issue.
But that's all the things that you said then, they're all judgments.
Correct.
So it's like...
That's violent communication.
Yeah, that's...
Don't worry.
Yeah.
I felt it.
Yeah.
Lost my mind over it.
Yeah.
It's crazy how they've just done a circle then.
Straight out judgment. I mean, that's not, you know, blah, blah, blah. We're having a conversation and I say something that I'm feeling or honest about that triggers you, and then you have a reaction to that. Then I'm like, oh, okay, wow. something.
And
Do you know what I mean? Like, so holding that space for that. But if somebody's just straight out saying, you know, you've got facial hair and you.
I don't like the way you look.
Well, hang on. Here's one.
I don't like that look on you
Here's
today.
one. So
Stop looking like that.
they'd be,
Can you change your face?
Can you not be?
well, I wasn't allowed to have a beard. I had to shave for 10 years straight. So
Wow.
it was a 10-year
Is that right?
relationship. Yep. And then,
My lord.
you know, having when there was time apart from each other because, you know, there was distance and whatnot, you know, them, you know, it was early days technology and them checking the browser history. Oh, you've been watching porn? Yeah? That's cheating. You've cheated on me. What do you mean I cheated on you? I said, what do you want me to do? I'm away for like, and then realising myself like, you know, what was I satisfying?
But those comments towards you actually have nothing to do with you.
I know.
Yeah.
I've worked
I mean,
that out.
of course, at
Yeah.
the time you don't know that, but you know, that person, it's their stuff. If someone's creating rules about how you're being, sure, you can change if you want to, but it's like if it's like, oh, you're not fitting in
Yeah,
with
conforming to
what's going to be okay for me. That's very unhealthy.
And if anyone wants to know to dress like a dad, you have to wear Gazman.
What's Gasman?
Got some label there. Only dads wear it. I think I've got one shirt.
Is that a type of orgasm?
You want me to guess, man?
just plugged them.
Yeah, I
Free
love the way you
plug.
talk dirty. Hey, so just going back to the trigger points though, you know, one, if you're having a sincere conversation with someone, yes, I'm not responsible for anything that you're triggered by what I'm saying. But then this is probably the violent communication, that if I know that triggers you and I'm saying it,
Oh, yeah.
that's completely fucking different. And I think I feel like sometimes, I should say in a
Get
relationship,
off on it.
but females, yeah, they say things to you to get a reaction.
100%.
You know.
I'm guilty.
Yeah.
Make-up sex? I'm 100% guilty. I will,
What you
I
do?
will, like that dynamic, like the elastic band, you know, pull back and,
Yeah.
It's,
Are you saying like you've created a scenario to have makeup sex?
well, not that. Sometimes you know what triggers that person, but you can manipulate it.
I was
So,
about to say that's pure manipulation.
Yeah. I'm guilty.
Yeah.
You can manipulate
Well, I'm
it.
sure
and then,
we've all been
but,
guilty and
Like you'll come back to them quickly and like playful and they'll know and then it ends up to something sacred.
What?
Yeah, and I think it is true. We're not responsible for the other person, but in my relationship, if my other person is hurting, then I do want to take on a level of responsibility to acknowledge that hurt and to be able to see the person in that hurt and meet them at a certain level where I'm not making them wrong, but I'm also validating my own experience. So both experiences get validated. And in a way, we're not here to make our partners happy, but we do want to create a safe environment. So if we're creating a safe environment, then I am in a way responsible for whatever comes up to create that safe environment or to at least contribute to it. I feel like no matter what we're communicating, if we're having an argument, both parties are hurting in some way. If it's we feel attacked or we feel victimized, it's about both of us are then responsible to bring our own hurt to the table and to see it in the other person and to acknowledge it and to level with that person instead of being like, well, I didn't mean to do that. Like, that wasn't my intention.
dismissing it.
Yeah, and it's
So is
easy
that-
to do that. It's
is
like,
that
well, that
where-
wasn't my intention. I just did this because of this. If I do that, then it just squashes her.
When somebody's in that situation and reacting, I don't think that's not the time to have that communication because they're in the reaction, and so it's never going to feel like, you know, even if you say, oh, didn't mean to, you know, like that can seem flippant or, you know, like you don't really care or whatever, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
They're filtering that through, you know, different a different lens. So
Yeah.
it's to just go to acknowledge, oh wow, okay, I triggered something. You're having some whatever experience, like to validate the experience
Yeah.
without judgment, and let it be, and then you talk about it when it's over.
Possibly, but I also feel like when you've opened the wound in that moment, if the space is then created, there is still a level of this has been left open and I still feel unsafe. Even if I then have to come back into a space to talk about it, the trigger might not be as active. When the trigger's active, I feel like there's a way of really leveling and acknowledging where in the moment she feels safe and heard. And it's like, I can see that this is really painful. Like I can see you're in physical pain. And acknowledging the experience. It's the child. It's the inner child.
Inner child. Yeah,
It's coming back to the inner child. It's how, if a little child came up to us and was upset, we wouldn't say, we'll come back to you in an hour and we'll talk about it then. We would acknowledge and be with that child.
Well, even the work I've done with Eugene, and I'm sure you will agree with this too, being in sound healing and things. You know, you always encourage me, Jen, when I'm having those, like when I'm my most, I mean, you never used to encourage me to come in and see if I'm at the top of the world, everything's fine.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you wanted me coming in, crawling in, grabbing the carpet and, you know, ripping my hair out and fucking in World War II, you know?
Yeah.
Because I guess that's where you can do your best work. And is that the same with you, Luke, in terms of sound healing and...
Sort of healing? I guess so.
Yeah.
Most people, they're in crisis when they reach out to me. And some people that just come, crisis comes soon after, because it's also an activation of, if you're feeling safe in a place, if you're feeling safety and quiet, like this whole, we went with you in India, when you start getting to that space where you're actually willing to start looking, then it's going to come.
And that's that gift at the end of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
At the end of the heartache.
Yeah. But also, like, I completely agree with what you're saying about, like, you know, you can't leave it because if the moment's there. But you've also said that you've held the space for that person, which, you know, perhaps not everyone does. And there's, you know, when things are triggered, it can trigger that, you know, can be reciprocated. And then it's not a safe space and it ends up being... my feelings matter more than yours and blah, blah, blah. So I totally think that, yes, you know, to go into it when you can. Yeah. But sometimes if it's violent...
Yes.
Or, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, volatile.
Volatile, yeah.
Then, you know, you don't want to be dealing... You got to wait for the fire to just calm down.
Yeah, agreed.
And, you know, and then you can talk, because really, otherwise you're having conversation with an ego.
Absolutely.
And that's not going to go well.
No, 100%.
You know?
I agree. Yeah.
What happens if there's never a time of talking? From experience, like, I mean, you can walk around the block 50 times and you still come back to fire. And it doesn't matter what you say, you've never been evaluated. I think that's probably the point of your relationship where it's just over. If you can never, if there's never a point of you being able to come in and have those conversations, I guess that's when you do know are you happy in that relationship? Because
you have to be willing.
There's got to be two.
There's got to be two people. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you can't have both come to that place and work through that communication, what's the point?
Yeah. And I think that comes back to choosing somebody you're compatible with, in a sense of, like, you have the same values. I think that's what we're going wrong, not wrong, but maybe with the whole dating apps, and just it's a mess at the moment. And we talk about surrender a lot on these podcasts. If we surrendered and we took sex out of it and looking for, like, a sexual partner, and we trusted that if we are fully surrendered, we will be guided and something will bring us together. It's magnetics. There is a force that brings two people together that would be pretty compatible. If we don't get in the way and try and control and try and seek, it will happen eventually. It just happens.
You just touched on something then, dating apps. Who's been on dating apps?
I have.
Me.
Yeah.
I have.
Too,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, I can't do it. Like, people,
Yeah,
I get people there,
experimented.
like, if you're not there constantly, like, talking to them, texting them, messaging, and, oh, this is not flowing. Hang on, like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm more, and I say to them, I'm more face-to-face, but, oh, why are you on this then? Like,
You
I'm
wonder
trying
what
something
people are
different.
actually
Like,
looking
Yeah.
for.
you know, like they,
But if there's
or they'll
not-
try and get you off there straight away and get your number, and it's like they either want to marry you straight away off this app, or like, you know, like they just want to be love bombed, if they say love bombing or whatever, you know, just flooded with that constant rush of like.
I guess this is
Bing,
what
bing.
we're talking about, like our like the toxic, like what we're fed with, what we've got to do to get into a relationship. Like, I mean, I know growing up, it was all about just fucking, like find a good, like
Like getting told, yeah, as a young male, like
We're now these apps, and that mentality is just on steroids, isn't it? Like you're now getting to choose.
Yeah, that's the fuck boys.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, for men especially, we're very
labelling, but-
visual creatures. So we are visual first. And so if we're
It's like
on
a
an
high
app,
tally.
it's literally that.
It's like a high
yes,
tally.
no, yes, no, yes, no. We don't
Well,
even
see,
read.
I won't name the app, but you know, I had a few mates of mine, and they said to me, "Oh, why'd you take me off social media?" I said, "Because little did you know, 3 of yous that are all my mates are all chatting and sleeping with the same girl." And she would message me and go, "Oh, your mate there, your mate," and I'm like,
Yeah,
I said,
right.
"I don't want to deal with any of that. That's not my business."
Yeah.
So I had to take them off social media, and they got shitty with me. But I said, if you're going to be on that app, I can't have you there, because I don't want to deal with like when they find out, or I got my view on what that app is. You know, I call it public toilet seat licking. But anyway,
We
you know, sharing fluids
Oh, wow.
at the same time.
we've what else is there though? So these days,
Church.
Life.
Yeah. Hey, life.
I've been told church.
Living.
Yeah.
Just living.
Being a single
Kick out.
single dad, I get told like,
To me, just it comes back. I don't know.
Trust.
Communicate.
I reckon,
Yeah.
I reckon just let it happen. Like, let it.
Yeah, just let
the
it
universe will put who needs to be in front of you at the right time in the right place.
100%. And it doesn't mean that
It's true.
all of our previous relationships were wrong.
No.
Because
It's a
they
journey.
made us into who we are
Learning.
today. And it's all this learning curve. It's like, I mean, you would have learned so much through all of those experiences about yourself, about your own boundaries, your own
It
values.
took me till 48,
Yesterday.
48 years old, like until 2 years ago, until really to understand,
And what was it? Was there something that hit home? That,
like the constant, back and forth, breaking up.
but was there something significant that just triggered you? Like we were talking
So,
before.
like I said, I would avoid them. Like I would just, I could sleep back to back, no words, no touching, no intimacy, like a ghost. Basically, they're a ghost, back to back for 6 months, no problems. And then that's when they turned around and said, you know, I was laying next to you in bed, and I never felt so alone in my life. And then them leaving, but then thinking I failed, I was inadequate, and all this trauma brought up for me, but then realising that's their journey. Because during the time together, them constantly leaving, them constantly leaving, them constantly leaving, and me having to realise, you know what, there's something there for them that they need to resolve and heal. And then also the relationship with their father, and then also the relationship with my parents and myself and my inner child, and doing a workshop, and then realising, a little while back, they asked you to look at your 5-year-old self, and what's the first words that come to your mind? And mine, everyone had all different words, and mine was "I love you." So me knowing that I'm longing for this love, want to be loved, and then realising how my heart loves, and the journey I'm on, not everyone's going to be on that same journey.
So when you were sleeping back to back with this girl or those girls, did you know that, or were you just like senseless from it? Senseless? No, is that a word?
Were
No,
you
like-
aware of
yeah.
the lack of, that kind of
Like,
felt
did-
good for you?
Like, were you purposely doing it, or were you just unconsciously doing it?
Oh, for a while, they're probably unconsciously doing it. It's just more like, I'm not going to give in, I'm not going to let you win.
Okay,
Like,
yeah.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like your ego, eh?
Okay,
Yeah,
Pretty
There you
much,
go,
yeah.
yeah.
Like the
Tick.
child.
yeah,
Yeah.
the unhealthy ego,
the-
man.
The inner child.
Yeah, yeah. I get
I'm
that.
not going to
man.
break. Like,
Yeah, yeah. The stubbornness.
But I broke.
Yeah. Well, it only gets you so far, doesn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
I feel like somewhere along the way that safety was lost, right? Because I feel like
the ability to heal and repair. That was the main thing.
Together as well,
Yep.
as a unit.
And then constantly having conflict on birthdays, my birthday, her birthday, Father's Days, like significant events, and constantly having conflicts on those times.
Yeah.
And so realising there's more to this, and realising, that's when I said to them, hey, do you want to go do some counselling? Let's work out where we went wrong, grow, help each other and whatnot.
I get that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, you're doing the mechanics of what you thought or what you taught, like through porn or whatever, is the right thing. And there's a zero intimacy. And, of course, that's what we all want. We all want the connection.
Correct.
That's what we're after. But, just having sex isn't giving anyone that.
No, and I mean, I would have rather have gone in the shower and satisfied myself rather than be with that person than thinking, like, how did it get to that stage? Like, and then knowing that, after you've been with someone for a while, you kind of build up a psychic sort of link,
Yeah.
and I could dream or say something like, oh, who's Peter? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, who's Peter? Like, how do you know Peter? Oh, he's a client. I know something's
Really?
more like having that connection. I think a lot of guys are blind, but a woman knows if they're that guy, they can sense things. They know.
100%.
They know.
100%.
It's woman's intuition.
Yeah.
I think we've all got that.
We do have it. Like
I think
mine's on fire. Scary. But I'm interested to know, was the toxicity of her judging you and the names and whatever was happening between you, was that from the very beginning or did that develop over time?
I think it was when we started living together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was there a time when you started living together that it was like, oh, shit, this might not be the best for me?
Yeah. Like when I couldn't work out. I'd come out of the shower, getting dressed, and they'd be in bed. And you're going to cheat on me, and I'd be like, "What are you on about? What's wrong with you?"
Sure.
And that comment you said, I said, "Look, one woman's enough. Like, I've got enough headaches with you. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? And then constantly them saying it, and then it virtually evolved to one day like, yeah, okay, I will then. I will. Is that what you want? I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like, and then realising, okay, they've got a trust issue, and trying counselling with that person and going to a counsellor and then them saying, okay, da-da-da, but then saying that person, you have a serious trust issue.
Yeah.
I don't like that counsellor, let's go to another one. Same thing popped up again.
Sure.
Don't like that one, let's go another one. Third one, three, telling that person three of them can't be wrong. I've got things to work on, but you have a major trust issue that you need to work on.
How crazy is that, just on that note, like how couples can go to counselling to try and get the counsellor to tell that person what they think about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, to validate their own stuff.
Jen? Like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so if two couples go to a counsellor, it's like, I want to take my couple there so the counsellor can reassure them, well, I'm right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see people all the time that have been to counsel. It's like, well, that didn't work, did it? I mean, because it becomes people's opinions and it shouldn't be, but judgments come in. I'm not saying that that's everyone. But, I mean, again, like just what you were saying that, and thanks for being really vulnerable about that, is that even if she had issues with trust, ultimately she didn't feel safe.
Not correct. Yeah, I didn't make her feel safe.
No.
To her,
and that's not. I'm not necessarily putting that on you, but I'm just saying within relationships, if there's trust issue, it's like, yeah, you might have some triggers or whatever, but if you don't feel safe, you're going to have trust issues. Doesn't matter who it is, male or female or whatever.
One thing I learned from that person was, as I was dating them, and like I said, I learned early, like fathers, and their daughters, daughters and dads, the relationships, and she had a terrible relationship with her father.
Of course.
And when and then her parents were together but not together, so living in the same house but still not together, and she grew up watching her mother be with another man and whatnot, and
yeah, so
the dynamics changed. So then they've witnessed this relationship growing up of where, and then I remember going there and staying at the house and just hearing this conflict, and like I was blown away. Like I'd never seen two people go at each other Well, it was like insane, and I was just like far out. Like, is this what you've witnessed, like growing up? Yeah, from 5 years old.
So what do you in this sort of situation? Because this is what I was talking about before. Of like when's a good time to get out of the relationship, or at what time
You try and work on it. When that conflict came to me, she would go off at me, and I'd be like, "Whoa, calm down. We're not your parents," and it would make her think. So we're not your parents. Let's talk about it a lot. But then seeing triggers and just like what Jen said, obviously I didn't make them feel safe, but I have a big saying that you're the master of your own emotions. You know, when people come at me and go, "Oh, you made me feel like shit," or "You made me," I was like,
No.
So I control your brain. Did I push a button in your head saying feel like shit, feel like this? Because I'll tell people real straight, like you said, like ruthless. It's not. I can't control how you're going to feel. I can say things. How you react to it is completely up to you.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think I just want to say, like, on that, you know, just to be clear for people listening, like the safety thing, it's not about like, I'm not talking about, oh, you're going to beat someone up or that, you know, there's violence or anything. It's just about with vulnerability and connection makes somebody feel safe. Like it's like you're holding, you know, it's like a bit of cotton wool around you or something. Like you feel it's a nurturing. And I guess if you've got no map for that, which a lot of people don't, but then that's the thing to look at but you know, to have that conversation. It's not, you don't know what you don't know.
Well, we've still got that responsibility, don't we, to, although we can be ruthless in the way we say things, we've still got that responsibility to at least be mindful about it or have some compassion for what that other person might go through.
You don't have to be ruthless to tell the truth.
No.
You can tell the absolute truth in complete vulnerability.
Yeah.
And in love.
In love, yeah.
The only reason we're being ruthless is because we feel threatened in some way. So the whole ruthless of telling the truth is because you don't feel maybe that they will listen. That has to be said in a certain way because maybe in the past it's not been, you haven't been heard in that way. Like if I try to not be ruthless, you know? Like if I have a truth that needs to be spoken, I know that if I speak clearly, calmly, and in a space of love, then they are going to receive it and hear it. But if maybe my version of ruthless might be different to you guys, but if I'm ruthless, the chances of it being heard and listened to is very slim.
Fuck, that's a good point, man.
So when you say ruthless, I think of, I don't know if you've got kids, Jen, but...
No, I don't.
Like for young boys, you know, you got son, for boys coming up, like what role models do we push them to? Like there's a lot of social media and, you know, I've had my son say, oh, Andrew Tate, you know, he comes out with some pretty ruthless stuff. You know, views on relationships towards females, like, you know, you got a lot of people for, you got a lot of people against. Like to push your son, like the role models, it's hard. Like who do you push him to give him a positive?
Well, you.
Yeah.
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 You, bro.
What is it when your kids turn around and go, like you said, when do you leave? You know, I had my kids turn around and say, that relationship is toxic between you and her.
Wow.
That's toxic.
Maybe we turn to them.
Oh, hey, well,
That's
my
right.
kids.
Well, of course.
yeah, my kids have been my biggest teachers.
Yeah.
And I think this is what comes down to, like, for you, there's only a reason why you've got to be ruthless is because you feel like you're not being heard.
That's it.
And sometimes the opposite way, like, you've got to be open to accept, to be taught as well, like to put your fucking ego back behind you. And my son, he's only 8, and mate, he's probably taught me more than any other person on this earth.
Yeah.
And he does it quite naturally, and he doesn't have to be ruthless in trying to tell me.
Yeah.
He does it with compassion and love, and
That's right.
and sometimes he doesn't even have to do it in words.
Yeah.
You know, you can just see his unconditional love for me that it just makes you want to be a better father for him. You know,
This is the light side of authority. It's speaking with conviction, clarity, solidity. Authority that has to shout it from the rooftops and impose power, same with the dominance and submissive thing, is toxic. There's two sides of it. You can speak with authority and be listened to, and it's an energetic thing. It's like if you're just speaking, you can tell when people are just like, hanging on every word that somebody's saying because
or
they're
waiting to
speaking.
say the next thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
not listening, is it? It's like,
Yeah.
well, that's
Yeah.
the agenda. But I don't think that the need isn't to have somebody agree with you. It's that you're understood, that somebody's heard you. That's all that we need,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know.
So putting this back into the contents of relationships, in a relationship, what is the best way to approach a conversation that is getting heated, but you want to listen, you want to understand? I guess one of them is it sitting still and actually just listening.
I know, like, from a personal thing, like when I was going through, you know, obviously you can imagine I had some pretty volatile conversations after, you know, finding out about the affair, etc. And of course, he was so in his ego in that space. It made communication extremely difficult. And his ego would trigger my ego because my hurt ego arced up. And so then, you know, there was this period of like, no one's getting, it's not okay. But I know you know, I worked a lot on myself. Like, I worked on the fact that I couldn't change what was going on. All I could change was how I was looking at it, and or just get out of it, like completely, you know. But to me, to completely get away was, I knew that really wasn't the answer for me in my situation. So what I would do would be I would really work on being really, really present. And I would try and have a conversation, and if it arced up his ego, I would just hold space. And if you are able to do that, that person's ego is like an extinguisher to a fire.
Yeah. So reacting is giving his ego.
So
more
he
power.
would, it's one of two
That
things
thing.
happened. So after some time, so he would walk away because he couldn't stand it. It's like holding garlic up to a vampire. It's like, bye. Which of course I hated because that triggered the leaving thing for me. But, you know,
Yeah,
but
okay.
then after time, it was the non-reaction, it simmered him down. And he was able to then listen and then, you know, then you can move on and have a conversation from that.
Is another
That's
key point that you just mentioned then is your ego and being aware of that ego or that voice. So for argument's sake, if you're having that conversation with me, if my ego, I can hear that ego firing up at me and what I'm going to say back next to something that
Is
triggers
that your
me.
inner child? There you go. Like,
Well, I don't know what it is. What's your feelings? What's your...
No, the ego isn't who you are. Like, the ego's like your identity. Like, I'm a human, you hurt me, you do blah, blah, blah. You know, it's this false self. It's the thinking mind. It's not your soul, it's not your heart. It's not really, it's the neediness. It's like, you didn't do this to me, I need that, blah, blah, blah.
It's like the personality.
I
So
think
Yes,
last time on the
thank you.
podcast you talked about that voice that tries to push you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that voice that's saying, oh, you know, that's my role, that's my job, you're
Yeah,
below me.
exactly.
That's the ego.
Exactly, that's the ego.
Yep.
So and in that conversation, when you start hearing that ego talking, I guess another key point is to just recognise it, settle it, and try and maybe re-center yourself into hearing what the other person's saying.
Yes, but also too, the ego is your programming. So, like, you know, like I said before, it's like you're seeing the world through these filters, and, you know, sometimes when the ego gets triggered, and, you know, Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body, you know, that takes you over. It's bloody hard to get out of that when that gets its claws in. So you really have to, you know, but they're always the pointers as to what needs healing. But it's to be aware of that, though, with your partner and go, oh, well, that just, you know, that got triggered and there's nothing you can do about that. But, you know, it's not on you. But then that's not the time to go,
Talk about...
you know.
And
And
you have to
alcohol.
want to be in a conscious relationship
Yes.
because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the ego. It's the the negative aspects of ego, and a lot of it is unconscious, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So it's when we don't even know we're doing it. And so coming back to when we enter a relationship, it's, do we want to be in a conscious relationship where we are willing to do this together? Because some people aren't. And even having that conversation will show where you're at in the stage of your life anyway. Because I had relationships, and conscious relationship was like, what the fuck is a conscious relationship? Only till recently. So it's
Well, that goes back to what you were saying about females wanting a particular way in the bedroom, you know. I guess you got to work out what it is you want and who you are.
and it's not at your level.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes,
like,
that's right.
it's not that they're below you or anything. They're not at your level of evolution of where you want to be moving forwards. And instead of, she might be the hottest fucking woman you've ever seen in your life, but it's, you know what I mean? It's not for you, and you'll know, because it will probably bring up all the stuff that you thought you'd put behind you and dealt with and all of that sort of stuff. Because I'm in a relationship where she doesn't trigger the stuff that in my past relationship, all of this stuff was being triggered. It's not that it's not there, it's just that there was a reflection in the partnership that brought up a side of each other that wasn't working.
So you say then, you mentioned as well that, Dave, like, what is it then when you get the guys and, like, you know, I'm guilty of it, you know, they've got a girl half their age.
That's, I feel like,
What's going on there?
well, it depends. It depends whether they're
Relationship
with
with
that girl.
themselves,
Yes. Okay, this is what
midlife
happened.
crisis.
Yes.
I've been guilty of it.
Exactly what happened.
And
in
she
my
had-
scena-
She had
Talk
daddy
about
issues,
this,
you
Jen.
know.
So that's
Cut
what
that.
happened in my scenario, okay?
Yep.
Midlife crisis for absolute sure. And I'm not him, so I can't answer for him, but, you know, it's
ego. I can answer that. It's
totally
ego.
It's totally ego, and it's not dealing with your own shit. And it's...
And you know, and people would ask me, you
And
know,
it's like, oh, you know, I'm feeling inadequate in some way, so let me go do this because that makes me feel better. You know, I've got a young chick, or, you know, like, right? But it is what it is.
it's
but then-
100% ego. It's, you know, like,
Yes.
people ask, oh, what was it? And I said, I can tell you one thing that it was, and that's when I realised it was ego.
Yeah.
You know, that person, you could be at the Wildflower Rock Pool, like some fancy fine dining, everyone's dressed to the nines. She comes, sits on your lap, washed her hands, starts ripping food apart and feeding you, like hand feeding you and licking. It's like you feel like, fuck, I'm a king. Everyone's watching, looking like
Oh my
I'm a
God.
king.
Yeah.
Here's this person half my age, like feeding me like I'm a king, like from the medieval times, like.
Yeah,
I think it's
that's ego.
subjective because
That's ego.
it might
That's
have
a
been
massive
ego
fucking ego.
in your situation and your situation, but I've seen and I know of relationships not completely half their
Well, it all
age.
depends how old they're. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And that is one of the most healthy, beautiful unions that I've ever come across. So, and that's not on display whatsoever. It's like it's so respectful and so honouring. So it's completely subjective.
I've seen some too, yeah.
Yeah.
Very rare.
Well, I just want to give you a different outlook on it. It is ego, and I've
100%.
I've been there, you know.
100%.
But there is another way of looking at it as well. There is the feminine essence of a young woman that males want, you know, naturally, and it's up to us to either take that energy in a sexual way, or it's up to us to just actually accept that's what it is, to energize yourself and breathe it in. And because I know
I
I
went
know
the flip side from young, like, and then you wanted the older one where, I don't know, like the older one was more attractive and sexier, and like seeing someone with that life experience and confidence and obviously like healed and like that not confidence but like the stability.
Yeah, life experience.
Yeah,
Life experience, yeah.
Yeah. It's very attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I think when I was talking before about, you know, my marriage, one of the relationships and basically, you know, coming back down to my ADHD, at one stage being told you got a sex addiction. Because, you know, I'd look at a female and just think, the first thing that would come to my mind is like, in the bedroom. And it's like, it wasn't that, it was to do with other dopamine levels and whatnot, and then realising I'm not addicted to sex. There's been periods of times where I haven't had sex for long periods of times. You know, I was in the temple in Thailand as a monk. I was in another place where I didn't want to be. Yeah, it's more to it, that relationship,
Yeah,
I think,
for
with
sure.
your inner child.
I guess that's what I was saying about the younger woman as well. Like it's how you take it, I guess.
It's whether it's like what your intention is for being with that person.
It was a
And
contradiction because although the ego was getting satisfied, feeling like king, there was also an embarrassment for me. Like, oh
Sure.
shit, they're too young. Like, it's I got kids. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And then working out that obviously there's me satisfying their daddy issues and then me satisfying my ego.
Yeah, for sure.
I wasn't with anyone at the time. I didn't cheat.
But sometimes it does work as well. You do know of relationships.
I think that's it too, like the daddy issue. I mean, if you've got the
100%.
combination of both, which I believe that
100%.
that's what happened. It's like it is what it is. But again,
then-
it's just it's like a perfect storm. It's like needs are getting met, and it's
The
it's-
funny part
it's easier
was-
to do that than deal with your own shit. That
The funny part was they were engaged at the time, and they were to a wealthy older man, and satisfying their needs because it wasn't just daddy issues. They it was financial needs for them. And all my mates, I remember, going, oh, they couldn't believe it, this young girl and whatnot, and they were just blown away. And then a lot of them thinking, oh, you're going to get your heart broken. But one of my mates that knew me quite well goes, nah, it's going to be the other way around. That person's going to be traumatised. They're going to have the heartbreak. And did. Like, there's this young girl wanting to have children with you and wanting to marry you and saying you're the love of your life after, 3 weeks? And it's like, well, that screams alarm bells to me. But I was satisfying a need for myself. The ego, the sexual need, and just, it wasn't right. Wasn't right.
because the ego's very selfish. It's like
Becomes a beast.
me.
It does. Becomes a
Yeah.
beast.
Yeah.
What was your topic? Communication.
Let's say initially.
I'm just seeing if we've covered
vulnerability?
everyone's.
I think we've definitely covered
Was it vulnerability
mine.
or-
It was and it was like looking to the other person for your own happiness, and then I said I'd go into romantic things and reveal the challenges of romantic relationships, and we've all gone there. So yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, we've covered a lot
Yep.
today in this podcast, and I feel we've only really scratched the surface.
Yeah, I know. Like always.
Round one.
And I feel like we've all equally been quite vulnerable in our own walks of life, all of us. I feel like I've shared a lot. Well, I mean, I think we've all shared a lot. So, first of all, thank you each and every one of you for being on here, but also just bringing a real heartfelt conversation to the table, particularly around relationships.
Yes. Amazing.
It's quite easy to talk about other topics about ourselves, but relationships has been it's definitely up
The
there.
hard talk.
Yeah.
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 And so I'm just going to wind it up with that. So thanks for coming on. I guess is there anything else that should be said just to finish this off? Like words of wisdom.
Just feel like it will never end.
Yeah,
It's like it's
I
a
feel like
never-ending
we'll just
journey.
open something else up. So maybe next time.
Yeah.
And even with relationships themselves, it's like it's a never-ending journey
Yes.
of learnt experience and, just
I
how...
think there's not enough education around it, like especially at a young age. Like just there's not
And
enough
whatever you're
education.
experiencing is your experience.
Yeah.
So it's I think we tend to look at what somebody else did, and it's like, well, they're having a different experience to you. So I guess a lack of judgment, like stop judging yourself on behaviours, and like being a bit more open to more compassion about why we do what we do, and being a little bit more understanding of people's behaviours.
Yeah.
And those who are listening to this and it's resonating with you, Jen's details are on my website, so is Luke's. In terms of if you're wanting to seek more advice or want to heal or, just want to know more, even reaching out to Danny or myself, because, this can really bring up some emotions that might be coming up just even listening to this. We have spoke about a lot.
Yeah.
And, even I'm processing some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So reach out. But yeah, look, thanks for coming on again, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
I look forward to the next topic that that comes up and having you on the board again, man.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.